Support for the Abortion Diary comes from listeners like you. This Abortion Diary entry was made possible by the generous financial support from Rachel Cook. If you're a fan of our podcast and want to support us in continuing to share our abortion stories, become our patron on Patreon. No amount is too small. I've been self-funding the podcast for years, but I need your support to keep it going. To learn more and become a patron on Patreon, visit patreon.com/The Abortion Diary or make a one-time donation on PayPal. All donations are tax deductible. Abortion happens every day. Millions of people around the world will have an abortion each year, but the majority of those people will never talk about their abortion experiences. What if millions of people broke their silence and told the truth about their lives and their choices? This is Melissa Madera in Santo Domingo, República Dominicana, and you're listening to the Abortion Diary podcast. These are the stories we share.
So my name is Marisol, and I had an abortion in 2011, so that's 6 years ago. I'm bad at math, 20 something. And I was actually doing an internship abroad. I selected to do an internship with an organization that works with garment workers in Bangladesh. And I was in grad school studying like policy, and I wanted to go away for my summer 10-week immersion program because I'd never been like outside of like the US or Mexico. So I was like, oh, this is my chance to like finally go out and like learn about the garment worker industry in this country. Because my mom was a garment worker here in the States. So I'm like, what happened to all those jobs? And I was like, I'm gonna go far away. And at the time I was with my partner. We were actually married, and our relationship was pretty much in the rocks. We met when I was really young, like probably 5 years before that, and we moved from our home state to Michigan, and lived together for the first time. And so we were already having like trouble in the relationship, and he was working in another state. So I didn't really interact with him that much, and the little times we did, well, whatever. So I go abroad, and the first thing I notice is like I start like getting really like nauseous, and I thought like it was like the country, like it was really hot. It's like I went in the middle of like monsoon season, so everything was like hot and like busy. And Dhaka is like a really like bustling city. It's like New York, but like I don't know Bangla, and I didn't know anybody there, and I was just like, I'm either really dizzy or really nauseous, or either the city's making me nauseous or I'm sick. So somehow or another I figured out a way to get to like the nearest clinic, like where like they told me I was pregnant. So that came as a surprise because I'm like, I use protection, and like I like, oh, that I only did it like once. Like I was like not even like I was not prepared for it. And I was far away from home, and I didn't know what to do. So I like contacted my partner at the time, and I told him about it, and I think we had a common understanding between each other that like he never wanted to have kids, and because I was in grad school, I was like, I'm broke, I don't want to have kids either. But I think the situation just kind of like flipped whatever concept I had about having kids. Like I don't know what about it, but it was just like, what happens if I do have a kid? And I share that kind of like hesitation. Like, what if I do want to have a child? And I think the resolution to that conversation was he pretty much said, like, it's up to you, and you decide kind of like what you want to do. So I still was like undecided. So I was like, okay, so if I have an abortion here, what do I have to do? Where do I have to go? And I realized that it's illegal to have an abortion in Bangladesh. The country is very Muslim. And I was trying to like find groups that did it or like information. And I just realized like it's impossible. Like if they find out you're having an abortion, they will prosecute you or do something to you. And it was a very bad political situation that I was going to get into. It was already bad because I was like a foreigner in another country, but then it was bad because that's something that you're not supposed to do. So then I found like this organization called Women on the Web, and like I emailed them. I kind of knew I was like later in like the time frame that they say you could have an abortion. So I went back to the clinic to get like a sense of like how far along I was, and they gave me like you're like 10 or something weeks, kind of late. So I was like, I emailed this Women on the Web portal thing, and they like, okay, we'll send you the pills because you're in this situation. So I ended up like receiving the pills like probably like 2 weeks later. It took a while, and part of it was because it was stuck in customs at the airport, and it was a whole headache just to get access to the pills. Like I had to find somebody to translate it to the customs officer at the airport to like, hey, can you like give me these pills without saying like what I was going to use it for. So that was bad. And then like at home, like back at home, like my partner was like kind of alluding to like, well, if you do this, then I'm like, and he's like, he's kind of alluding that like he wanted to be a parent, but like he didn't really like want to. So I was really pissed off at that point. I was like, dude, I'm like trying to get this done, and you're like not even like helping me in any way. And your hesitation also doesn't help my hesitation. But I ended up deciding to do it. It turned out to be like the week of my birthday, which is like the worst birthday. It's like a day of my birthday. So I remember going out to have dinner and taking like the first pill. I think I don't know what kind of pill it is. For dinner on my birthday, and I just like, this is the worst birthday ever. I was already starting to feel nauseous, like at the dinner table we were having with other interns. And then I like went back to the hotel or the hostel I was staying at, and I ended up taking the other pill. So I was like scared out of my mind. So I Skyped my best friend because I like felt really bad. I'm like, I didn't want to do this by myself. But I had like spotty internet, so all the bad. So he was with me for the whole time I was going through the process. I'm like, and what he had me doing was like just talking through like, okay, so what's going on now? Like, how are you feeling? We were watching like YouTube videos together so we could pass the time. But it felt like he was like holding my hand like throughout the process. And then at some point, I ended up somewhere between like the bathroom and the bedroom where we were chatting. And I remember like waking up like hours later apparently, and they were like, I had like a pool of like blood. And apparently I was screaming because somebody like was knocking at the door the whole like at some point. So I think the entire process was really scary. It probably wasn't safe, or I don't know, like if there was another way I could have done it, but that was the only way I had. So yeah, and after that, I like cleaned myself up. My friend like was like, I had like 20 missed Skype calls, and he was like, what the hell happened to you? Like, you should have just like, he was like, what happened? And I was like, I don't know. He's like, you should probably go to the hospital. So I went to the hospital, and they were like, you're not pregnant. If you were pregnant, like, it's done. So that was a relief. But I just felt like that whole process was just like really messed up. Probably not the ideal, but it just ended up being what it was. So like by the time like that was done, like I just felt really like upset and uncomfortable, and like I asked my school to like send me back home. So I asked for like emergency grant to come back home because I didn't want to be in somewhere else. I really didn't have anybody like to talk to or like say anything, so I just like got myself home. And then I guess several weeks after that, what happened, I ended up meeting with like a counselor at the school and like sought therapy. I did go through like a period of like grief and like PTSD. Like I kept dreaming of like that situation found myself. Yeah, and I think that experience was like, yeah, I need to move on from this relationship. I just completely disconnected from my partner and like didn't want to be near him or with him. And even years later after that happened, like that never got resolved. And I think it was one of the drivers that led to separation, apart from, him being just general douchebag. But I didn't have the emotional intelligence or like the maturity to like move on. I also realized that I did want to have a child, and I just wasn't confident in myself that I could support a kid on my own or had the tools. I probably didn't have the tools, but I probably could have figured it out or had the strength to do it. So yeah, that's in a nutshell the story. I don't really share with anybody. I shared it with a few people that know about it. Yeah.
How did you find Women on Web? Were you just searching the internet?
Pretty much. It sounds crass, but I like just Googled it. And I was like really apprehensive because I'm like, is this a joke? Like, can you seriously buy like pills online? And I kept researching, and I was like, is it safe? Like, can you? And I like visited a lot of forums, and I'm like, what are the actual pills you have to take? And I'm like, okay, they match. It's like, but again, it was like, even when I was like about to take the pills, I was like, is this a real pill? What if it doesn't really work? Or what if it's something else? Like, I don't know. So I think it had like enough of a reputation online that people were like, okay, this is a real deal thing. It's a resource for women. So I was like interested in it.
Did they send you any instructions?
They did. They send instructions online, and then they send me like a Manila airline kind of envelope, and then they had instructions there too. And so it was pretty detailed. But again, like this whole trust thing, like, is this real? I like went online just to confirm that it was accurate.
How much did it cost?
I think they have like a scale. But it's like it's pay what you can give. So I don't remember, but I think I paid something like $35, which now I realize is like dirt cheap compared to like procedures here, which are like $500 and up. But that was really inexpensive, but even that was like cost prohibitive. I can imagine for people who don't have access to it.
Did you tell anyone in Bangladesh about being pregnant and needing an abortion? And was there anyone you could talk to there?
So there wasn't anybody I could talk to. So what happened was, when I went to the clinic, I think the second time, and they actually had to do like a sonogram. they were like, the person who was like looking at the sonogram was like, oh, I think it's an ectopic pregnancy, so you need to go to the hospital. So I'm like, what? And then they put me in like in an ambulance to take me to the hospital, and they had better equipment there. And when I got to the hospital, they were like, we can't see you until like your father or your husband gives us permission to see, like sign off these medical release forms. So there I was in a stretcher, and I had to call my internship like supervisor, who lived like an hour away in a town far away. So he actually finally came to like translate. I mean, everybody spoke English at the hospital, but he's like, I will represent like the male figure. And I was so embarrassed because they were like, well, because I was trying not to have that happen, like not tell anybody. And and they were like, well, we'll have to call your dad. And like, my dad is asleep. It's like 13-hour difference. Like, it's 3:00 in the morning in New York. And they're like, no, well, we have to call your husband. And he's like, it's the same. It's 3:00 in the morning, and like, you can't talk to them. And they're like, okay, we'll have to talk to another male figure. And so he finally came and like stood up for me. So he found out that I was pregnant. And I was like, oh no. And he was like so excited for me. And like, he's like, oh, I'm so happy for you. And like, they went through like the whole medical procedure of like showing you the fetus. And I was like, please don't. They did that. And he was like, I'm so excited for you. Like, he's standing next to my bed at the hospital. I'm like, why don't I have privacy here? Like, I really don't need you to know. So he found out, but I don't think he ever found out like that I went through procedure. He was just like, oh, because I left right away after that whole situation happened. So, but he kept bringing up like, oh, like, how did that go? And I'm like, not well, I guess. But it was just like, why? Like, I was like, okay, I just need this done. I was like, I'm not even gonna debate like this because I'm not Muslim. I don't know extreme like fundamental like Islam. I was like, oh, I am very over my head, so I just need to get this done and like get out. And then I'll process it later. And then later I was like, yeah, that was so messed up. Like, why did I have to go through that? And it was just like little things. And I'm like, all that was so unnecessary. And I'm like, why am I in this situation? It's like, what a weird situation to be in, apart from what I was already going through. So yeah, it was weird. Which, I thought it was ironic because I was also kind of waiting on my partner to like decide on fatherhood. And I'm like, yeah, that's also messed up because, I mean, we both made a choice, whatever, to have sex, but like, and he always said I want to have children, but I was kind of like hoping in some part of me, it's like, maybe he'll step up and like say, because you're going through, I don't want you to go through a situation like this, maybe you'll step in. But I'm like, that's messed up because it's like, it's a whole commitment of a lifetime. And I know I wasn't ready, even though I did want to have a kid. I wasn't financially ready, emotionally ready, or like to like take on that responsibility. And at least it forced me to think about what would be the ideal situation where I could be a good parent, which was also made me think about like my parents and like how they did their parenting. As immigrants and like being in a country they don't really speak the language and navigating resources. And I'm like, here I am in a country I don't speak the language, trying to navigate resources, and I can't barely do this one thing, let alone like what are the implications of a lifetime to have a child? And I'm like, in the end it was a good decision. It was a hard one, but it was just like, that's the one I needed to take. So yeah, I really didn't have. There was another person there who was also doing an internship, but she was like so like in her own like little world that I didn't know her, and I didn't feel comfortable talking to her.
Have you shared your experience since then with people in your life?
Yes and no. Yes and no. I shared it with my sister. Because I came back home and they're like, "Why are you home? Well, I thought you were gonna be like another 10 weeks over there, or like doing something. Why are you here? And why do you look so like pale?" And like my mom, I think, is like could tell right away because it was funny because before I left, I actually flew out of New York. It was easier. And she's like, "I think you're pregnant." She like looked at me and I'm like, "What?" Like, no. And I remember that off comment that she made before I left for Bangladesh. And then it turns out it was. And I was like, damn it. I was like, my mom's a bruja or something. Like, how the hell did she tell? But like when I came back, my mom was like, something's off with you. And I don't know what it is. And it's like, so she doesn't know. But sometimes she makes like weird random comments, like, because I ended up divorcing the person I was with. And she's like, "Well, I'm glad you never had a child with him." And I'm like, like you don't know how awful that sounds and actually is, because that ended up happening. Like, that's me in my head. Like, I'm having conversations with myself. But she says that like, "Well, I'm glad you didn't, because they would be messed up that you got divorced." Because she's very Catholic and very, very conservative. But I did share with my sister, because she had lost a child through miscarriage, and we just had a moment where we shared that experience. I'm like, "Well, this is what I did," and she offered us sympathy, and I think she was like, it was helpful to share with her, even though we don't have that close of a relationship, but it was helpful. Because she is a mom now, and I think she's learned a lot from that experience. I haven't shared it with my current partner, and I don't really know how to. Yeah, I think that's the plan. I don't know. I don't know how to. It's like, "Oh, hey, we're having ice cream. Let me talk about my abortion."
Do you want to share it with him?
I do. And I think that's part of the reason why I reached out, because I find myself having a difficult time communicating, and that's an issue just in general, and that's an issue we both identified as something like that I haven't like a hurdle I haven't grown out of, or a challenge I haven't grown out of. And one of the things he always asks is like, "You need to tell me more about things." So it's really, I guess it's, in sharing the story, it's really a practice in communicating. Because what I often find myself doing is like just keeping things inside and like asking everybody else to share their story, and then I internalize it. I'm like, but I don't share my stories or like what I see or my perspectives on things. That's important.
Do you think you'll ever share this with your mother?
Maybe, yeah, I don't want to give her a heart attack. I think, yeah, it's like, she's not, she's pretty much dead set in her ways of like how she views the world. And it's kind of, maybe I'm painting her in a wrong picture, but it's very like black and white. Like, this is good and this is bad. The divorce is bad, but it's good for you. So there's areas of gray. I hope to, as I build my relationship with her, but it's never a good time sometimes.
When you were sharing your story, you said that after your abortion, you went through a grieving process. What was that grieving process like?
So I was still in school. I actually had to go back and return to taking courses and passing classes. And that was really hard for me because I couldn't focus. Um, uh, I also like was going through therapy and with a like counselor at the school. So I met with her every week, and that was new to me because I've never gone through therapy. But somehow in my head, I was like, I need to talk to someone about what I'm going through, and I need help talking about it. And I part of me is like, why should I feel bad about this, or why am I having such difficulty talking about this? Because I was like women's studies major and like a feminist. I was like, no, I'm like pro-choice, and I'm like, oh, I'm in a situation where I'm actually challenging that through a real experience, and it's very complicated because I had internalized a lot of like my Catholic upbringing, and I hadn't really ever questioned it. So I was like, oh, like now I have all these issues with ethics. Like, where was I? Where were these issues when I was, not having to deal with in real life? So yeah, so that was like, it took longer than I expected. It was just like random crying, random like, don't like, I didn't want to like even be touched by my partner, and I rarely saw him by that point. But I was like, I don't want to even touch you. Like, don't touch me. Don't like talk to me. And it never kind of, with him, it never kind of was resolved. But with the therapy help in that sense. And ended up getting a cat, so I guess that helped a little. I like ended up transferring all this mothering to my cat. So that was fine. But it took a while. It took longer. And even to this day, I mean, I don't randomly cry in the train, but like, but I see my friends, and like, some of them have kids, and I'm like, yeah, that could have been me, but it wasn't. So,
What exactly do you feel like you were grieving?
so that it took me a long time to even answer that in my own head. I don't think I was ever, well, maybe initially I was grieving this concept of a child I had in my head, and what that child would look like, and what me as a mother would look like. So I had random dreams of a kid in the subway, and I was like, oh, am I like imagining things? But I think I was just grieving I think ultimately I was just grieving the opportunity to deal with this in another way. And I was grieving actually having that opportunity to talk with my then partner about what it means to be a parent. Because it was easy to say like, oh, we both don't want to have kids. But we never had a real conversation about like, what would it mean if that wasn't a possibility. And then I think in my partner also grieved too, but he did it in a way that was very destructive. Like, after I made the decision to have an abortion, he went ahead and like got a vasectomy without telling me. And like, he just told me like after he was done. And then he's like, oh, I don't want, his rationale, the way he explained it to me was like, well, I don't want for you to go through that again. And I was like, but you never talked to me about it. Like, we should have talked about it. Like, I understand your body, understands my body, but like, we could at least talk about it. So when he did that, I like found out like when I was still in Bangladesh. And I'm like, you should have at least called me. Like, you couldn't even text me. So it just, it just broke down in just a horrible way that it was not good for anybody. So I grieved that. Like, and at that time I thought I was going to be with him forever. So I was like, no, this can't be forever, because you just destroyed like this whole possibility of parenthood, which by then I was like, it could be a maybe. And I just wanted that opportunity to be a maybe. Like, maybe I could be a parent. And when he did that, and it just kind of destroyed that. So I was grieving the relationship too. Yeah, and it just boiled down to like very basic, like, did I do this safely? Did I like mess up my organs or something? And then I just, taking myself to the hospital and just making sure everything was okay. So yeah, at that time it was just like, did I do it correctly? Did I do it well? Is it done? And then I can process everything else.
Why do you want to share your story?
So one of the reasons I wanted to share it was because I thought we find ourselves in difficult situations and different versions of that. So it's always, I always thought that like the stories I heard were important. I actually before I went through the procedure, I actually read some of the stories in other forums. I don't think you guys were around then, but I read like people's experiences, and I remember reading it afterwards and not feeling alone, because there were so many, pro-choice, or not like a black and white situation. It's a gray. Like, yes, you can feel conflicted. Yes, you can still, be supportive of people's rights to choose. And it's more complicated than that. And I think my story, if anything, is complicated. So I wanted to share that experience to be like, yeah, it's okay to have it be messy and still be messy in a way, or still be processing it. And yeah, I think that's important to share.
How does it feel to have shared your story in this way?
It should be interesting to hear it after the fact. I feel like if I'd done it even 5 years ago, it would have been a different version. So time is always good to process and garner different lessons from it. So I'm already forgetting, it's been a long time ago, and most recently I started thinking about I want to have a family, but yeah, it'd be interesting to hear maybe even 5 years from now what I think about my current version of this story is.
Because it changes.
Yeah.
And I think you spoke about this a lot, actually, but I wanted to ask again, how did it feel to have gone through this alone?
I mean, I wish that nobody would go through it alone, but 5 years ago I was grieving that I went through it alone, and then I was like, wait a minute, I wasn't that totally alone. Like my friend was there, even did via Skype. I mean, he felt uncomfortable because he's a dude. He's like, I don't know how to help you, but I didn't even know how periods work. But he offered himself to be there in the hours. He was like, well, I'm here if you need me. So I didn't feel completely alone. And even if I was thousands of miles away or whatever, only available via Google Chat, I wasn't alone. So that felt good. And then sharing the story with other people who were like, oh yeah, I had one too, and it wasn't that bad, but you realize you're not that alone. So yeah, so I wouldn't say I was alone, even though I may have been physically alone, but I was actually I had a community, and still do.
How often have you shared it with other people?
So I shared it with my family, my sister, a friend, and then my friend who was on Skype. He's like, so what happened? And he was like, okay. But, he didn't ask for details. He was just I think he was scared too. He was just more scared. And then I really haven't shared it beyond that. I think I'm planning to share more, but yeah. Well, I told one of my friends, and then but she was like, she wanted to so she told another friend, but one thing is to share your story to your friends, and then the other thing is to want to share it in public or podcasts, and I think we talked about. I remember we talked a little bit about it, but then we were kind of shying away, well, no, what repercussions would there be to our professional lives if people find out. Stuff like that, things like that. So I'm like, I don't care. I was like, they can find out. You can Google me, and like one of the things I didn't share was like somebody was like doxing me on like I think it's my ex, or it could be somebody else, but like they shared my story, like the abortion story, on like online, one of those cheater forums, and like they flipped the story around in a way that was like painting my ex as like the victim. So I confronted him about it, and he was like, it wasn't me, I didn't post that online. So technically, if somebody looks my name up, or like with my, just like that I did this internship, they can find out like my information and like everything about me. So kind of one of the reasons I wanted to do it was like to preempt that and to tell my story as I remember. I was like, I didn't want someone to use that against me at some point in my life. Like, and apparently he did, or somebody else did, but it's stuff like that. Yeah, I found out like 2 weeks ago. I was like Googling my name and like I was looking for an academic paper, and that came up, and I was like so distraught, and it actually posted a picture of my current partner and his social media like username, so that like the ask is that encourages people to like send us like hate mail, kind of, so that asking me to go back to my ex. It's like really fucked up. Yeah. And I was like so distraught. I was like, oh my god, like this is public. I don't want that out there. My friend, I can't take it down. Like I asked him to take it down. Apparently it's really hard to take it down. And I'm like, why would you post something like this? Like, he's crazy. So we'll see what happens. I asked him to take it down, and apparently you need like a court order to like take it down from these websites. These like I didn't cheat on you. You cheated on me. And like I didn't post it, and he's saying he didn't post it, so it's hard to like track it down. I have no idea who did it. I think it's him, but I don't know who he told like that this happened to. That's the other thing. I don't know who he shared the story with. Like, I didn't know you shared the story. So it's kind of so telling my story is empowering for me. It's kind of reclaiming back that. Yeah.
This is Melissa, your host and the founder of The Abortion Diary. For more information about the Abortion Diary podcast, visit us on the web at theabortiondiary.com, or email me with your questions or comments. If you're a fan of the podcast and would like to help us reach more folks, please subscribe on iTunes and write a review or rate this podcast, even if it's not how you listen. Your reviews and ratings will help us grow in the iTunes rankings and reach more people. I would also love to hear from you. And you can also listen to over 150 abortion stories on our website, SoundCloud, Stitcher Radio, or your favorite podcast app. And the Abortion Diary can't continue without your support. I've been self-funding the Abortion Diary for over 3 years and need your help to continue to share our stories. Support the Abortion Diary by making a tax-deductible donation or becoming our patron on Patreon. You can also bring me to your college campus or organization. I use the money generated from that to make more Abortion Diary episodes. And thanks to you for listening. I'll be back next week with a new story.